Welcome everyone, Costin here with a discussion about some more fun campaigns in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. I've talked about some of the most fun campaigns, I've talked about the best on Legendary difficulty, but I do want to continue talking about some of the best campaigns that currently exist in the game as it currently stands. Though, of course, this is all subject to change. Check out my videos on the best campaigns on Legendary, as well as some of the most fun campaigns, or the most fun campaigns as they currently exist. In a future video, I'll be talking about some more bad campaigns, because I'll obviously talk about some of the worst, some of the best, and that's what I'm going to be doing going forward. So anyway, let's get started. Now, the first campaign I want to talk about for this video, and these are not in any specific order, I think they're all pretty decent campaigns that you can enjoy currently in Warhammer 3, but the first one to talk about is Taurox the Brass Bull. I think Taurox has had a good campaign ever since he was introduced in Warhammer 2, it's always been a fun campaign, though I guess some people have gotten tired of the mechanics of it. And to be honest, the Beastmen can get a bit stale if you play too many of their campaigns. But certainly, this campaign is the best Beastman campaign by far in the entire game, and a pretty good campaign in general. So Taurox, he starts in Nagrand, and he is gonna leave a trail of death and destruction in his wake. Like, Beastmen are fairly simple. Diplomacy doesn't really exist, trade doesn't exist at all. And they're just out to murder every single person they encounter. That is the Beastman motto, kill everything. Now as Taurox, you get the dread cost benefits of minus 25% for Minotaurs, as well as maintaining momentum from successful battles, which give you bigger rewards when it comes to Rampage. Now Taurox himself, he gets the Blood Beast ability, 10% weapon strength. He leaves rivers of blood effects in regions after winning a battle. And his raiding stance is upgraded to Juggernaut raiding stance, which gives him more campaign movement range, but reduces raiding income. Though money isn't really an issue for the Beastmen, because they don't use the money for the sake of getting units. They instead use money for their structure. So Taurox, look at him. He's an angry brass bull. He's looking really good, actually, over here. Now, skill-wise, he does get... skill-wise, when we're looking at Taurox, he does gain a significant amount of power through his skill line as well, though he does have one particular choice that will close off the other. So you can either increase his ward save and melee defense for Minotaurs, or you can go with Terror and increase melee attack, depending on what you're going for. He does get Corn Corruption in a local province, gets Spell Resistance, Brass Body, Juggernaut, Bestial Rage, unit capacity for Gorgons, 10 armor for Gorgons, Giants, Jabberslights, and Cygor units, as well as Gore Feast. So he is an absolute monster in battle. He isn't the best melee combatant in the entire game, absolutely not, but he's certainly capable of doing a lot of damage in any battle that he gets involved. And Beastmen are just a fun campaign. Like, if you want to play a campaign where you don't have to worry about the empire building aspect or anything like that, and you just want to slaughter your way for it, playing a campaign as the Beastman is highly recommended. Now, for Taurox, he is obviously going to have some issues in his campaign specifically. The issue that he's going to encounter is that he would want to take this particular settlement over here in Clan Karan, but that's a bit of a tricky battle, unless you fight him fairly easy. But the nice advantage of the Beastman, and just to avoid having to fight that battle over there, just gonna set the battle difficulty to easy. If you don't in a particular turn, or if, you know, there's battles that are very easy and you just don't want to bother with them, it's like, you know, set the battle difficulty to easy. Now, what's great about the Beastmen, and what makes them incredibly good on the campaign map, is this. So Beastmen have the ability to set up Hearthstones. Now, there is a limit. You can increase it with Marks of Ruination, but that requires you to basically put a Hearthstone in a region, and then you get these grounds, these hunting grounds. Like, every battle you fight within this red circle will contribute to this meter over here on your Hearthstone, and then you can do a ritual and increase your Mark of Ruination meter, which unlocks more units, army capacity, all that kind of good stuff, and more Hearthstones. So a campaign about Beastmen is about building these Hearthstones in strategic locations and then just picking fights with people that are in that particular region. But what's powerful about the Beastmen in this is that these Hearthstones, they have some pretty powerful garrisons, even at tier 1, and you can certainly increase the capacity. You can certainly increase the tier of the Hearthstones with Dread. You gather up Dread, and you can set up Hearthstones at tier 3, tier 4, tier 5, with very powerful garrisons, and the AI will rarely, if ever, attack them. Never mind the fact that if you put up a Hearthstone in a location, you're going to start generating chaos corruption in that particular province, which is going to make it very even more difficult for an attacker. So you really can't lose a campaign as a Beastman. Like, it takes overwhelming force for the AI to even consider going after your Hearthstone, so that gives you a lot of power within the campaign to just go blow everything up. So in this particular campaign, within the first few turns, you can wipe out Silostra, Alifanar. But like, Alifanar is a pretty decent legendary lord. He'll provide you a decent enough challenge. And then you can go on and take over the entirety of Wolf 1. Now, what makes Taurox's campaign so good is this rampage. So the way this works is you have momentum, right? The more you build up, the more you have rampage marks, you have momentum. Now, momentum represents the number of turns that you have for the bestial rage, basically, for a rampage. And then you have rampage marks. Like, you need to build up these rampage marks all the way up to 150. Though, of course, a rage can end before that. But here's the thing. After you achieve tier 1, then you get the ability to replenish his campaign movement range, which you can use. Like, you can use some of this momentum to replenish it. So you're gonna so you gain momentum the more you fight battles, but you can also use momentum once you get to tier 1 over here. You can also use momentum to replenish his campaign movement range. So you're capable of fighting battles non-stop across the campaign if you're playing as Taurox. You have an incredible movement ability throughout the course of your campaign playing as Taurox the Brass Bull. The only limitations, I would argue, with the Beastmen is the fact that you can only have one army from the very start of your campaign, and it does require you to get to Ruination level 2 in order to get the second army. But you've got scalability as the Beastmen. Like, your units are recruited for free. You don't pay money for them. You do have unit caps, similar to the Tomb Kings, but unlike the Tomb Kings who rely on structures, you rely on Dread, which is gained from battles, or from certain structures like the Heads on Spikes chain over here, which can be upgraded all the way to the whole of Beast Filth, which can give you quite a lot of Dread per turn. More Dread, more unit capacity. I would probably save it up to try and get things like Minotaurs, Cygors, Gorgons, Jabberlife. Like, if you can get a lot of those units, is game over. No one will be able to stand against you, because you will have the ability to recruit as many of those units as your capacity can afford for free. That is incredible power. It takes a while to ramp up, sure, but once you do get going, you get going in a way very few other legendary lords can compete. And number 2, we have Kholek Suneater of the Warriors of Chaos. Now, a lot of Warriors of Chaos campaigns can feel pretty dull, actually, when it comes down to it. The reason is, you're so powerful in many of these campaigns that it doesn't feel particularly great. Now, as Kholek, you certainly have a lot of campaign power. Like, this is me just securing Dark Fortress on turn 1. Now, here's the thing that I like about Kholek. So, when we're looking at Kholek, first and foremost, so Kholek, with every vassal, he gains quite a bit of weapon strength, 5% weapon strength, mass, and armor for each of those vassals. He also gains the additional. He also gains the ability to recruit more Dragon Ogres from Dark Fortresses. He does start with the ability of getting a Hell Cannon once he secures the Dark Fortress, and once he's level 2, he can get the Summoners of Rage Regiment of Renown. that is a pretty substantial amount of power that you have in your campaign. By the way, it's kind of funny that you can avoid this ogre army right over here and just like, you know what, I'm gonna get this Dark Fortress. I don't really care about that. Now, what's fun about this campaign isn't necessarily Kholek himself, though. I mean, Kholek does get soul cost minus 25% for Carnage Incarnate. That basically gives you Dragon Ogre Shagoffs, minus 25% upkeep for Dragon Ogres and Dragon Ogre Shagoffs, and 10% missile resistance for Chaos Monstrous Infantry and Monster units. So he's focused on the monsters with some of the effects that he does have, specifically Dragon Ogres. But not just Dragon Ogres. Chaos Trolls as well. And what I like about Chaos Trolls is they're a lot of fun to use in a battle. Like, these guys will tear through many early game units with relative ease. They have good stats. The only problems that Chaos Trolls do have is, of course, their weak armor and weak leadership. But that's why you can upgrade them once they get rank 3, which is very easy to do with these guys. You can upgrade them to Armored Chaos Trolls. And Armored Chaos Trolls will absolutely annihilate many early game units in the entire game with relative ease. So you're playing a really fun playstyle with Kholek, where you have a focus on monstrous units of chaos. Now, what's great about this is a lot of these regions that surround him, be it in the Mountains of Morn, in the Northern Castways, in the Eastern Castways, they'll have an abundance of trolls for you to recruit. Trolls, Dragon Ogres, because you're playing as Kholek, you'll get quite a few of those. So that means you can throw in huge monstrous armies at the enemy and just watch them throw infantry in the air. Like, there's always been a fun element when it came to cavalry in Total War, but cavalry doesn't work very well right now in Total War Warhammer 3. Monstrous units do. Monstrous infantry units do. And that's what trolls do. They give you that fun factor. And that's why I really like this campaign. Just that alone would make this campaign really fun. But there's more. Oh yes, there's more. See, over here to the west, you have Mr. Grimgor Ironhide. Now, Grimgor is one of the more powerful legendary lords in the game. He's also a legendary lord that consistently gets a powerful empire and manages to wipe out every foe that stands near him. In some campaigns, he might be weakened. He might not be able to kill Kholek, and Kholek can become a threat. In some campaigns, he can struggle, but I've rarely, very, very rarely seen Grimgor getting wiped out. And generally speaking, it's like 0.1% chance of that happening in any campaign that you're playing on Legendary difficulty to begin with. But here's a great and wonderful aspect of playing the Warriors of Chaos. You have the ability to vassalize factions, right? You have the ability to vassalize humans, elves, greenskins. Oh yeah. So Grimgor starts with one settlement. Now, the way the vassalization works is that you need to reduce a faction to their last settlement, and then you get an option to subjugate them. Since you're very close to Grimgor, one of the things you can do very early on in your campaign is just march your army, like once you've defeated this ogre army, right? March your army directly at Grimgor, taking some territory along the way, recruiting some units. And what Grimgor will generally do, what the AI will do, like either Grimgor is going to march his army here in Ice Spear, in which case he's going to be vulnerable, and you wipe his army out, and then you take Saber Mountain and subjugate him. Or he's gonna spend some turns, the first 2-3 turns of the campaign, building up an army in Saber Mountain. That means you're gonna have a hell of a fight on your hands, but keep in mind what you're starting with. Dragon Ogres, Chaos Trolls, Hell Cannon. Grimgor is formidable. He is not that formidable to be able to stand up to him. And one of the things you can take advantage of is, yes, he will have a full stack in Saber Mountain. He have the garrison and settlement battle, which sucks, but he'll generally get a second lord, which will be outside the fortress, and since you're attacking him in a position of strength, he will pick that battle. That second army won't run away, which can happen, by the way. And if you can attack an army just outside the fortress where there's a full stack, generally they'll pick that fight, and it's an ideal outcome for you. So what you do, you pick that fight, you do a lot of damage to Grimgor's army, minimize your own losses, then you out-resolve Saber Mountain, and you subjugate them. And that's when the fun begins. Because then, you've got Grimgor as a vassal. And he's just as powerful as a vassal as he is on his own. What do you do then? Well, you might give him Ice Pure back. You should take it along the way. And then you should just declare war on every single one of your neighbors and watch Grimgor, yes, Grimgor, as a vassal, literally paint the map in your colors while you do absolutely nothing. After this point, you could AFK and just declare war on everyone you meet, and Grimgor will conquer every single one of them. Or you could do the more reasonable thing is you conquer the north, and you declare war on the ogre factions as you encounter them or as Grimgor encounters them, and watch Grimgor conquer the entirety of the mountains of Moor. Now, you might have a reason to send one army at least to support them in that, because you might want to vassalize some factions. Like, for instance, you might want to vassalize the Tusk Sons over here. You might want to vassalize the ogres here, because you gain more power with each vassal's more income, all that kind of stuff. But imagine a campaign where you have one of the most powerful legendary lords in the entire game as your vassal from the first few turns of that campaign. And that is why Kholek's campaign is such a great deal of fun. I really enjoy this campaign in a way that's hard to really describe. The campaign for me to talk about is Grombrindal the White Dwarf, one of the special characters by Games Workshop for the dwarves in Warhammer Fantasy. Now, Grombrindal is by far and away the best legendary lord for the dwarves. The reason behind this is because he gets this event after 2 turns, the Living Ancestor. Now, you can either get a major casualty replenishment benefit or a major upkeep benefit. I personally go with casualty replenishment because the dwarves have poor casualty replenishment, and although there is a mod that gives you a craftable casualty replenishment, it's still a huge benefit to have that as the dwarves. Now, it's only something that's going to affect Grombrindal, but Grombrindal does have some other benefits as well. Now, faction-wide benefit, it's not particularly great, though he does have a huge evasion chance when using the Underway, so you can use it with less risk, and he does get 20% weapon strength when fighting against elves. All elves, just remember that, not just the Dark Elves, all the elves. Now, on top of that, what makes Grombrindal amazing is his skill line. Now, he gets 10 melee defense for Quarrelers and Iron Drakes as units, and 10 leadership. That's pretty substantial, and the melee defense basically puts his Quarrelers almost on par with Dwarf Warriors. Just 2 less melee defense compared to Dwarf Warriors. So they're very capable. The Quarreler units in Grombrindal's army are very capable of holding the line on their own. I mean, Dwarf Warriors are going to be better. They have more leadership. They have more melee attack. They do have a charge bonus and an armor bonus, but Quarrelers are the units you want to use. But here's what makes Grombrindal really special. He does have 4 quest items, 4 quest battles, basically. And each of those quest battles will, on average, give you about 8,000-10,000 gold from it. That's a lot of gold that you can use. Having those kind of quest battles can be really good. Now, if you want to have a less frustrating time in your campaign, get a mod that allows you to auto-resolve those quest battles, because it is very beneficial to have them. He has an easy time with his starting grudges, because basically 2 of them are like bully Malekith, more or less. Or rather, kill Malekith, more or less. So, Grombrindal, it was once Malekith's best friend, and then after Grombrindal died, Malekith was engineered a war, the most destructive war in the universe, the War of the Beard, or War of Vengeance, between the High Elves and the Dwarves. And Grombrindal literally rose from the dead because he was so pissed at Malekith, because Malekith swore an oath as Grombrindal was dying. Now, faction-wide, now skill line benefits, like if we're looking at the skill line here, it's nothing necessarily too substantial, with one exception, that 15% campaign movement range, and that minus 50% loss, vigor loss reduction. Those are 2 very substantial benefits, but this is not necessarily anything special, except those 2. But what makes Grombrindal so amazing, and if you can confederate him as another dwarf faction, he is an absolute huge amount of power for your faction. It's the blue skill line. So you get income from trade tariffs, recruit rank for all your units, recruit cost benefit, 15% campaign movement range. That's, by the way, one of the highest, if not actually the highest you can get in the entire game for an entire faction. Remember this, for your entire faction, not just for Grombrindal. He already has 15% it stacks with absolutely relentless. So he's able to move with 30% more speed across the campaign map. Then he gives you 6% casualty replenishment faction-wide, which does help in a great manner to make up for the weak casualty replenishment that the dwarves do have, as well as 1 global recruit capacity, which is actually pretty substantial for the dwarves, because dwarves do have limited recruitment slots. So Grombrindal gives you a lot of power in your campaign. And what's fun about this campaign is you're playing the best Dwarf Legendary Lord, and the Dwarves are a fun race if they weren't so broken in a lot of ways. Now, what you do over here is you start getting the clan barracks, so you can get quarrelers, and you start getting the siege workshop, so you can get artillery units. And then you build, then eventually you'll get 2 artillery units for Grombrindal's army, and 2 others for another army, and then you get rid of that. You don't need more than 2 grudge throwers. And you start building up a full stack, while beating the snot out of the Skaven, Beastmen, if you can catch these guys, wipe them out. And then eventually, once the Skaven are wiped out, you just go full vengeance mode on Malekith. Malekith can be powerful in a campaign, but if you hit them hard and fast early on, he won't stand a chance. You have a more powerful army than he does, and you're able to get across the campaign map a lot faster. Most of the time with Legendary Lords, I would say the best thing you can do in your campaign would be to, you know, spend points, spend 1 point in the blue skill line, then 4 points in the red skill line. With Grombrindal, I would say going 4 points in the blue skill line for that 15% campaign movement range is probably the way to go early on in your campaign, because that's a lot of campaign movement range that you can get. He can be a bit slow early on, but once he gets going, Grombrindal gets going. He gets going really fast. Once you've dealt with Malekith, you could decide to fight Valkia, or you might, or just, you know, try and find the opportune moment and conquer the entirety of Nagrand to the north, and then go pick a fight and bully Leaf Anar over here, because one of your grudges is to win several battles, win 5 battles against the High Elves, because the dwarves will never forget and never forgive. And just do that, pick that fight, and then, well, you've got a lot of territory at your disposal. A lot of territory that you can claim over here in Nagrand, to the north, in the southern part of Nagrand. You can pick a fight to Morathi, and you can try and make your way to the Darklands, to the other dwarves as well. It's a great campaign, it's a fun campaign, it's a powerful Legendary Lord. There's a lot of enjoyment to be had over here. So I would strongly recommend playing a campaign as Grombrindal if you're going to play the dwarves at all in Warhammer 3. Fourth campaign to talk about here is Azhagar the Slaughterer, the puppet of Nagash. The puppet of Nagash because he's wearing the crown of Nagash on his head. That's why he looks a bit odd, really, because he's wearing the crown of sorcery, and Nagash, well, Nagash is trying to mind control him, but Azhagar is enough of an orc to kind of shrug it off, basically. Anyway, his campaign is a great deal of fun, not because he's a greenskin legendary lord, and greenskins in general are a lot of fun to play on a campaign, but what I like about Azhagar's campaign is the kind of flexibility you have in it. So you get plus 40 diplomatic relations with vampire counts and Ark in the Black, so that more than that negates the aversion that vampire counts feel towards greenskins, because you're being mind controlled by Bone Daddy, so it makes sense. You also start with the shaman, so that's a great deal of magical power as a greenskin legendary lord from the very start. But what's crucial about this campaign, you get a research benefit and an income from sacking settlements benefit, which grants you a lot of power on the campaign. And Azhagar can make the most money, with the exception of Grom, of all the greenskin legendary lords, because he'll be earning tens of thousands of gold from sacking settlements later on in the campaign. Like, he's so rich. He'll be so rich, he'll be able to afford an insane amount of armies in this campaign. He has a gold mine over here in Karakungor. And what's great, especially about this campaign, with the exception of Draika, which is always a mood killer for anyone that starts near her, but with the exception of Draika, is the kind of options that you have in this campaign. Because playing as Azhagar, you can go with Savannah, Temperate, Mountain, and Wasteland. So you have a lot of territorial types at your disposal. You can conquer the entirety of the Empire. You can conquer the entirety of the The Badlands, if you so desire, you can go in the Darklands. You have a lot of choices in this campaign, and interestingly enough, there's a lot of diplomatic choices. Like, you can become Katrin's, for instance, or Kislev's best friend, actually, when you're playing as Azhagar the Slaughterer. You can be the one that saves the Empire from Festus and Vlad, or you can ally Vlad and install him as Emperor. Now, that's a lot of fun in any particular campaign. You will have to wipe out Ungrim, and you will have to wipe out the ogres over here, and I would recommend wiping out Draika and sacking your settlement, because that gives you a lot of money. But outside of that, you have a lot of choices in this campaign. You can go west, you can go even north if you so desire. I would not necessarily do so. I dislike the Chaos Wastes, personally. If you're playing a campaign as a non-Chaos faction, the Chaos Wastes suck for the most part. Unless you're Malice Darkblade, but that's a different discussion. But you do have a lot of choice in this campaign. You have a lot of flexibility, and I think that's what makes this campaign fun. Like, you can go west, as I mentioned. You can go directly south for the mountains, or you can go east. Another thing that's really great when it comes to this campaign, beyond the territorial choices, the diplomatic choices that you have with it, because you can ally a bunch of factions. Like, if you decide to help Katrin, like, you decide, okay, you know what, I don't want the Ostmark. You give it to Katrin, you'll make a military alliance with her. But another thing that I like about this campaign is that you start pretty close enough to Skarsnik, and you start close enough to Warzag. I mean, it is a bit of a trick, but you're within reach of Skarsnik, Warzag, and Grimgor. That's free of the other 4 legendary lords that Greenskins have. Like, you're too far away from Grom, he's far away from everyone else, but you have access to all of them, and you're powerful enough that you can just show up with an army, and just show up next to Skarsnik's main army, and just beat the crap out of him, and then force Confederation, because that's how Greenskin Confederation works. Like, you show up, you beat the crap out of the leader of another Greenskin faction, and then you force Confederation on them and gain their entire territory. And generally, Skarsnik, if he will be able to take over the dwarves in this campaign, because what typically happens for Skarsnik is Ungrim just wipes him out, right? Or Ungrim pressures him, Skarsnik pulls back, he ends up losing. But you wipe out Ungrim, Skarsnik wins, he can take a lot of this territory right here, and then you just show up and take it over. This campaign is a lot of fun because you can grow your empire to such a biblical scale. I think no other faction in the game can do it quite in the same possible fashion, the way that Azhagar, or possibly, Grimgor or Skarsnik themselves, but no one else can do it in such a way. And I would say Azhagar has the biggest potential of all of them, because Skarsnik will conquer all of this territory provided he's not attacked by Ungrim, right? And Grimgor himself will conquer the entirety of the Mountains of Morn. And all you need to do is have a hero chasing them down, or use a mod like Toggle Flag of War if you want to cheat on that. But you can just get a hero, whatever hero you can afford, whatever capacity you can afford to spare. Just have a hero chasing them down. Once you find them, send your army, keep track of them, have your army tail them, bring a full stack of troops, have a army as well with that, pick a fight, beat them up in a fight, and then gain control of their faction. Like, this is such a ridiculously powerful campaign that all the territory that you see from here all the way to here, and I'm including like the Eastern Badlands, the Mountains of Morn, all of this campaign territory can be yours within like 40-50 turns, because Grimgor will take the Mountains of Morn. Skarsnik, if you take out Ungrim for him, will take a lot of the Badlands. He'll take out the dwarves, and then you just show up, beat them up, and gain their territory, and you're #1 strength ranking in the entire game. Never mind that you can also be having secondary and tertiary armies just conquering the Empire while you're doing that with the Greenskins. There's a lot of fun and power in this campaign, and I quite enjoy it as a result of it. Finally, we have Heinrich Kemmler of the Vampire Counts. Now, the Vampire Counts are a pretty powerful race, though a lot of their campaigns, Gorst, Manfred, even Vlad, can feel frustrating to actually play through them. Partly because of the playstyle, partly because of the star position. But then you have Kemmler. Now, Kemmler gets diplomatic relations benefits with Chaos, basically. And in this situation, you're going to benefit from that by being able to get good relations with Be'lakor. So your northern flank in general is going to be pretty secure, which is great because you want to focus on other things. You don't want to head over into Norsca because the territory isn't suitable for you. Now, the Vampire Counts really powerful. They don't have global recruitment, but they do have the ability to flat out raise the dead. You fight a big battle, you can get some really high tier units in your campaign. You want to be careful when it comes to that because you can get units they can't really afford to maintain. It's always a bit of a balancing act when it comes to that. Now, Kemmler also gets experience benefits to Necromancers, though that doesn't necessarily matter. He is immune to cast Undivide the Corruption and cast Wastes Attrition, though, yeah, the cast Wastes are not necessarily suitable for him in any way, shape, or form, so don't go for that necessarily. And he has a minus 10% raised at cost. Beyond that, when we're looking at his skill line or his Lord effect, he gets replenishment in foreign territory, wins a magic cost, and Lord of Undeath. Now, the Lord of Undeath gives him the ability to summon Krell, and Krell will not degrade. So basically, you have a powerful caster Lord combined with a powerful melee Lord. And now, Krell is pretty damn powerful in a battle, and you can make him even more powerful with the special skill line, with the special skills that you do have available. So this just basically says Krell's combat ability will be greatly enhanced. Then you get horrible regeneration for Cairn Wraiths and Hex Wraiths. On top of that, you get hero recruitment White King in all provinces and hero capacity for White King, so you can get 3 of those once you unlock the skill. You get 15% campaign movement range, as well as devastating flanker and bonuses and infantry for Cairn Wraiths and Hex Wraiths. And then finally, you get Greater Arcane Conduit, and then you have these 2 skill lines over here, Lord of Scourge and Feral Master. One of them gives you a substantial amount of casualty replenishment upkeep for zombies and skeletal warriors. The other one reduces your raise dead cost and your recruitment cost by quite a bit and gives you the dead rise again, plus 15% chance for destroyed units to be restored after the battle, because you're playing a Necromancer Lord. You do have free items as well, so you can gain quite a bit of money by fighting these quest battles, at least like 8,000, 9,000 per each quest battle, because the quest itself will give you 5,000, and then of course you've got the post-battle loot and all that kind of good stuff. Now, the items themselves may not necessarily be too substantial, with the exception of the Chaos Tomb Blade, which does give you replenishment for hit points of combatants in range, resurrects dead combatants, and heals injured before resurrecting. That is pretty powerful as a weapon. The other ones, I wouldn't necessarily say so. Like, the staff is okay. Certainly the staff is pretty okay for magic, but you don't have an armor pierce, which can be a bit of an issue. But yeah, strap an armor of destiny on him. Now, Krell may not necessarily be the best combatant because you can't throw items on him. Unfortunately, I wish there was a way for that. But yeah, you do start in a great position here that really benefits you, because you're surrounded by a bunch of Bretonnians. And Bretonnians are not going to be capable of standing up to your units. I mean, Bretonnia is in a pretty rough state at the moment, simply because they're a cavalry-focused faction. Cavalry just doesn't work very well right now within the context of the meta. And you do have a bit of an issue in that you start in the Northern Grey Mountains, where one of the regions is over here, the other one is Carrick-Ziffin, held by Dwarves. Dwarves can be a bit annoying, but you do have an interesting campaign situation here with Musalan, where you can make an ally or vassal or confederate them, and you can really help them out. Musalan tends to lose their campaign against Bretonnia most of the time. But you interfere, you have a fight to Grom the Punch, you have a fight with Lewin Leoncoeur. That's gonna, like, fighting Lewin will piss off Karl Franz sufficiently that he's likely going to declare war on you. And then, of course, you have the entirety of Avalor, you have a lot of foes to fight, but you're playing a powerful race, and you're playing a pretty decent legendary lord. Like, all of the legendary lords of the vampire counts are pretty powerful in their own way. Different ways, to be clear, absolutely. Be it the Books of Nagash with Manfred, the necromantic power of Kemmler, the sheer melee ability of Vlad and Isabella, and of course the zombie horde of Gorst. they all have their own strengths that complement their race very well. So this is a lot of fun that can be had in this campaign, because it's always great to have a powerful race and have decent battles on your hands in your campaign, as opposed to steamrolling the entire campaign or only having the early game being difficult. So in this campaign, you're going to have decisions to be made, you're going to have to strategize, you're going to have to pick your fights, because if you fight everyone at once, you're likely going to lose. You are a powerful race, you are not the Warriors of Chaos who can just not give a damn about that. You do have to pick and choose your fights. And that's what I like about this campaign. And by the way, interesting note, Kemmler, if I'm not mistaken on this, is actually the oldest character, or one of the oldest characters that's actually ever been made for Warhammer Fantasy. He used to have his own army list, I believe it was. He no longer does so, but he's one of the oldest characters in the entire lore. He's certainly a very unique character. He's one of the best necromancers in the universe, obviously Nagash being the best necromancer, but Kemmler is the original necromancer in Warhammer Fantasy, not from a lore perspective, but from a timeline perspective, if you will. He was the original one created by Games Workshop. You do have an interesting campaign, you do have a lot of campaign movement range, you have a lot of possibilities in this campaign, and you get 2 legendary lords for the price of 1, with basically only having one that you have to level up, because, like, yeah, Kemmler's powerful caster combined with Krell, great deal of power in the campaign over here. You'll absolutely smash the Bretonnians, and then you have to be careful with the Empire, how you expand against the Empire. My advice would be to move against Lewin, take Orun, and then try and take Rungzint. Then you might want to take Marienburg and the fort, and maybe trade that to Karl Franz to just delay the war between them, because you want to stabilize the situation down here in the south, conquer Bretonnia, conquer Carcassonne, then conquer Alpha Lorien. Once Alpha Lorien has been pacified, you do have a lot of options. Now, what's great also about this campaign is you can take Wasteland and Mountains, Temperate, and desert. So you have a lot of terrain types, actually, that you can take over. Like, you can take over this entire territory of Estalia, Talia, go after Mogur, go after Skavenblight if you want to, Belagar. You should make some alliances. Like, you do have choices. And what I like about the vampire counts is you do actually have choices when it comes to your alliances. Because although there is certainly an aversion that factions do have against you, it is not an insurmountable level of an aversion that you're dealing with. Like, the Empire might have -40, but here's the trick. You get the Lamians, which give you +30 diplomatic relations, so that's more than enough. That's almost enough to get over that aversion. So you have a lot of diplomatic options when you're playing as the vampire counts. You also have the ability to vassalize factions, which is something very few factions actually have. So you can... what I mean vassalize for diplomacy as opposed to just subjugation. You can't subjugate other factions. You can except other vampire counts factions. You can only do subjugation on vampire counts. So with most factions, you can only vassalize them through diplomacy. And it can be a great campaign. It can be a great situation when you're trying to manage the diplomatic side of things, manage your armies, manage your empires, and really strategizing on the campaign map in a way a lot of races just simply don't do it. And that's all there is to it. Costin signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications, and stay tuned for more.